It was just past midnight in Manhattan. The city that never sleeps was finally quiet except for the soft hum of streetlights and the faint rhythm of traffic below. Inside the luxurious Crescent Tower Hotel, the lobby shimmered with golden chandeliers and murmured voices of a few late-night guests. Among them was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, exhausted after a long policy meeting that had stretched past dinner. She had stopped by for a quick coffee before heading home, just a rare quiet moment for herself. But peace didn't last. Suddenly, a sharp crash echoed across the lobby. A glass shattered, people gasped, security guards rushed toward a corner where a man had collapsed motionless, clutching his chest. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "That's him, that's Richard Vail, the billionaire investor," a name every newspaper knew. The man who had publicly criticized Alexandria's policies countless times. Now, he was lying helpless on the cold marble floor. Panic took over the lobby. Staff shouted for help. Guests backed away, unsure what to do. But not Alexandria. Without hesitation, she set down her cup and ran toward the fallen man. "Security guard, ma'am, please step back. We've called for medical help. Ayok, every second counts. He's not breathing." She knelt beside him, checking his pulse with steady hands. Her mind flashed back to her days working behind the bar when she once saw a man collapse and learned basic CPR to save him. Now, those same skills once learned in a small Bronx restaurant might decide whether a billionaire lived or died. The crowd stared in disbelief. Some started filming. Others whispered, "Is that really Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?" Ayok didn't notice. Her focus was razor sharp. She called out for help, commanding everyone around her with calm authority. "Somebody get me water and call 911 again. Tell them he's losing pulse." Her voice cut through the panic like a blade through glass. No one expected what she did next, and it would leave even her biggest critics speechless. The lobby was chaos. People shouted over one another, phones rang, and the billionaire's bodyguards formed a tight circle, unsure what to do. The man, Richard Vail, one of the most powerful financiers in New York, was gasping for air. His eyes rolled back, and his face turned pale. His entourage panicked, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stayed perfectly calm. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, checking for a pulse. "Weak, very weak," Ayok firmly. "He's not breathing properly. We need to tilt his head, keep his airway open." She motioned for help, but the guards froze, still suspicious of her involvement. To them, she wasn't a doctor, she was a politician, and one who had publicly criticized the very circles Richard Vail represented. Security guard hesitant, "Ma'am, please, we appreciate your help." But Ayok interrupting, sharp, "No, but, he's dying. Either help me or move aside." Narrator. Her voice was steady, commanding, not loud, but impossible to ignore. The guards backed off. A waiter rushed forward with a towel and a bottle of water. Ayok nodded, placed the folded towel under the man's head, and began chest compressions. The rhythm of her hands against his chest filled the room. 1, 2, 3, breathe. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Narrator slower. It was surreal, a congresswoman in a marble-floored lobby at midnight, performing CPR on one of the richest men in America. The same man who had once called her ideas a threat to capitalism, and yet here she was saving him. Woman in the crowd whispering, "Is that really Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?" Man beside her, "Yeah, it is. She's doing CPR herself." "That's unbelievable." Phones came up. Cameras flashed. Dozens of people were now recording, but Alexandria didn't care. Her eyes stayed locked on the man's chest, her breathing synced to his fading pulse. Narrator. Minutes passed like hours. Every sound in the room, the ticking clock, the distant sirens, felt amplified. Her arms trembled, but she didn't stop. Then, a cough, a weak gasp escaped the man's mouth. His body twitched. Ayok leaned closer. "Ayok, gently. Come on. Stay with me. You're okay." The crowd exhaled collectively, relief flooding the room. A member of his team stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "Assistant. Oh my God, he's breathing. He's actually breathing." Narrator. She kept him stable, supporting his head and making sure he stayed conscious. Then she looked up at the lobby manager. "Ayok, has anyone called an ambulance yet?" Manager stammering. We did. They're on their way." Ayok nodding. "Good. Clear the area, give him space and air." Within seconds, the crowd shuffled back. The panic turned into stunned silence. People looked at her with a mix of awe and disbelief. Narrator. Some saw a politician, others saw a leader. But in that moment, Everyone saw something more, a human being who acted when no one else did. The billionaire's breathing steadied slightly. His pulse returned, faint but consistent. Narrator softer, reflective. And now, she's the one fighting for his life. The friend nodded silently. And though Ayok didn't say a word about it, her actions spoke louder than politics ever could. Narrator tense, rising again. Moments later, the wail of sirens cut through the air. Flashing red lights poured through the glass doors as paramedics stormed inside. One of them knelt beside her. Paramedic, ma'am, you can step back now, we've got it from here. Ayok exhaled deeply, her arms heavy from effort. She nodded, stepping aside but staying close enough to help if needed. Paramedic checking vitals, who performed CPR. Ayok quietly, I did. The medic gave her a quick look, impressed. Paramedic, you just saved him. Those compressions kept his heart going. A murmur spread across the crowd. People who had been filming lowered their phones, now realizing the gravity of what they'd just witnessed. Ayok didn't smile, didn't pose, didn't speak for attention. She just stood there, calm, composed, human. As the medics lifted Richard Vale onto a stretcher, he opened his eyes briefly, confused. His gaze flickered toward Ayok. She nodded softly, reassuring him as they wheeled him out. The elevator chimed in the background, an ordinary sound on an extraordinary night. If you saw someone powerful collapse right in front of you, would you freeze or help, no matter who they were? Comment below and tell me what you would do, and don't forget to share what city or country you were watching from. Let's see how far this message of humanity travels. That night, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't just react, she led, and in that moment, the line between politician and person disappeared. But what came after, no one saw coming. The hotel lobby had finally quieted down. Paramedics had taken Richard Vale away, and the scent of disinfectant now mixed with the fading smell of panic. Most guests were still standing there, speechless, phones trembling in their hands, replaying what they'd just witnessed. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood off to the side, her palms still red from the compressions. She'd just saved a man's life, and yet, not a single word of gratitude had reached her. The billionaire's security team whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward her with unease. To them, she was still the woman who had challenged the wealthy, the one who had fought for fairness in a world built on profit. Security chief, ma'am, we appreciate what you did, but Mr. Vale's family doesn't want any statements made. This can't hit the news yet. Ayok, soft but firm, I didn't do it for headlines. I did it because he needed help. Her voice carried calm authority, the kind that silenced excuses. The guards fell quiet, ashamed of their own suspicion. Then a young hotel employee approached. He looked barely 20, his uniform slightly oversized, his voice shaking. Employee, excuse me, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez? The room froze. The word Congresswoman hung in the air like a spark. Heads turned, people whispered, someone muttered, wait, that's her? Within seconds, realization rippled through the lobby like a wave. Woman in red dress, I thought she looked familiar. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Man beside her, you mean the Ayok from Congress? Another guest. No way. What's she doing here? The whispers grew louder until the crowd began to shift, forming a loose circle around her. Dozens of eyes, dozens of phones, all pointed at the woman who had just performed CPR on one of the richest men in America. Alexandria didn't flinch. She just gave a small nod to the nervous employee who had recognized her. Ayok, thank you for saying it out loud. The irony settled over the room like fog. Moments ago, the same crowd had looked at her with suspicion. Now, those same people were in awe. A voice from the back spoke up, an older man in a business suit, his phone halfway raised. Businessman, she saved Richard Vale's life. That woman just saved him. Applause started softly, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger. People clapped. Some even cheered, not because she was famous, but because she acted when no one else had. The security chief, clearly embarrassed, stepped forward again. Security chief, Congresswoman, I didn't realize. Ayok, it's fine. You don't have to realize who someone is to treat them with respect. The line hit the crowd like a truth they hadn't expected. Silence returned, deep, reflective silence. Ayok looked around at the onlookers. Her gaze wasn't proud, it was compassionate, because she wasn't thinking about power or politics. She was thinking about humanity. She turned to the young employee again. Ayok, what's your name? Employee, Carlos. Ayok, Carlos, thank you. You did the right thing by calling for help. Remember that you don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. The boy smiled nervously, his eyes glistening. Just then, a hotel manager hurried in, flustered, out of breath. Is everything all right? I heard someone collapsed before he could finish. One of the guests blurted out. She saved him. Ayok saved Richard Vale's life. The manager blinked in disbelief, glancing between her and the crowd. Then, realizing the truth, he said quietly, Manager, Congresswoman, on behalf of everyone here, thank you. Ayok, don't thank me. Just make sure your staff knows basic first aid. Sometimes minutes are the difference between life and death. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Simple, direct, human. In that moment, every person in that marble-floored lobby learned something that couldn't be bought or sold. Dignity doesn't wear a price tag. Outside, the night lights of Manhattan shimmered against the glass. News vans hadn't arrived yet. The world didn't know what had happened inside that hotel, but soon, it would. Because one guest, still trembling, had live-streamed the entire thing. The clip was already spreading, hashtags forming, comments flooding in. Ayok saves billionaire's life, true leadership in action, humanity over politics. And somewhere, as the ambulance sped through the city, Richard Vale opened his eyes again, just long enough to whisper one word to the paramedic beside him. Who saved me? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The billionaire's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time in years, he smiled, not as a businessman, but as a man who had just been reminded what true worth meant. Have you ever misjudged someone only to realize later how wrong you were? Type I learned if this story hit you too, and tell us what city or country you're watching from. Let's see where this message of respect reaches today. Recognition had finally come, but not the kind that comes with fame. This was the recognition of character, and for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that was worth more than any headline. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Stevie Luke's hospital in Manhattan. The chaos of last night was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of monitors and the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that had almost stopped forever. Richard Vale, the billionaire whose name echoed in boardrooms around the world, was alive. Barely, but alive. Doctors stood around his bed, updating his assistant. Outside the glass, news cameras waited, hungry for a glimpse of the story that had already gone viral. The headline had exploded overnight. Ayok saves billionaire's life, from political FOs to unlikely heroes. When humanity beat headlines, millions had seen the video. Millions more were sharing it. But inside the hospital room, none of that noise mattered. The only sound was Richard Vale's slow, uneven breathing. He opened his eyes weakly, the ceiling lights blurring into a haze. Yes. And then her voice. Ayok, good morning, Mr. Vale. He turned his head slightly. There she was, calm, collected, and completely real. No cameras, no crowd, just her. Vale, you were there. Ayok, you collapsed in the hotel lobby. The paramedics said you'll recover. He blinked, trying to remember. Flashes came back, her face, her hands, the noise of the crowd. You saved me? Ayok, I just did what anyone should have done. But they both knew that wasn't true. Most people had frozen. Only she had moved. For a moment, silence filled the room, awkward, almost heavy. It wasn't just gratitude hanging in the air. It was conflict. Because Richard Vale wasn't just any man. He was one of the strongest critics of everything Alexandria stood for: worker protections, fair wages, taxing billionaires. He had once laughed on live television, saying, people like her don't understand success, they just envy it. Now, his life had been in her hands. I owe you more than I can say, Ayok. You don't owe me anything. Just take care of yourself. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. Vale, why did you help me? You could have walked away. You've read what I've said about you. She turned back, her expression gentle but firm. Ayok, I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a person who needed help. That's what being human means. He looked down, speechless. For the first time in his life, words failed him. Outside, reporters were buzzing. On social media, people debated wildly. Some called her an angel. Others accused her of playing hero. But the truth was simpler than all the noise. She had done what was right. When she finally stepped outside the hospital, microphones swarmed her. Congresswoman, did you know it was Richard Vale before you helped him? Ayok, no, I just saw someone in trouble. Are you aware he's been one of your biggest political opponents? Ayok, yes. And I hope he recovers quickly. We might still disagree, but at least we both believe in second chances. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Back inside, Vale watched her on the TV mounted to his wall. Her words echoed through the speakers, softer than the beeping machines beside him. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Second chances." For the first time in years, the phrase meant something. Hours later, Vale's publicist entered the room, holding a tablet. "Publicist, sir, the board wants to know what statement we're releasing. The media's exploding. Everyone wants your reaction." Vale stared out the window for a long moment, watching the city move below him. People, cars, lives, all the wealth in the world, and yet none of it could buy what she had given him: time. No press release. Not yet. "Publicist, sir, I need to speak to her first." That night, a handwritten note arrived at AOC's congressional office. It wasn't typed. It wasn't official. It read, "You saved my life when I least deserved saving. I've spent years fighting for power. You reminded me what real strength looks like." RVber. She folded the note quietly, placed it in her desk drawer, and whispered to herself, "Sometimes, the loudest change starts in silence." The next morning, a new video went viral, not of the collapse, not of the chaos, but of Vale himself, speaking from his hospital bed. "I used to think compassion was weakness. I was wrong. Last night, the woman I criticized most reminded me what it means to be human. Let's start acting like it." The internet erupted again, but this time, the conversation had shifted. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about empathy. If someone you disagreed with needed help, would you still step in? Type yes if you believe humanity comes before politics, and tell us what city or country you're watching from. In a single night, enemies became examples, and the line between us and them blurred just long enough to remind the world that we're all part of the same story. Morning sunlight poured through the hospital window, streaking across white walls and quiet machines. Richard Vale, one of the most powerful billionaires in America, was awake, alive, and very aware of what had happened. Across the room, a TV played the morning news. The headline read, "AOC saves billionaire's life, humanity over politics." Clips of the hotel footage filled the screen, her calm composure. The crowd's stunned silence, the moment she brought him back. The video had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, millions of comments. Some praised her, some doubted her, but everyone was talking. The door opened quietly. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped in, still in the same blazer from the night before. Her hair was tied back neatly, her expression calm. She wasn't here for cameras. She was here because it was the right thing to do. "AOC, Mr. Vale, how are you feeling?" "Alive, thanks to you." He looked at her for a long moment, eyes full of something unfamiliar: humility. "I spent years criticizing you, mocking your ideas. I thought you hated people like me." AOC quietly, "I don't hate anyone. I just fight for fairness. There's a difference." The words landed softly, but deeply. He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting toward the TV again, where clips of her hands saving his life played on repeat. Vale with a faint laugh, "Seems like the world's enjoying this twist." AOC half smiling, "AOC, maybe it's a good reminder that politics shouldn't erase compassion." There was silence again, not awkward, but thoughtful. Then Richard spoke, his voice lower, more serious. "Vale, you know, I built my empire on control. I thought money made me untouchable. But last night, I realized no amount of wealth can buy what you gave me." AOC didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, steady, compassionate, real. "AOC, then maybe that's the lesson worth keeping." Outside the hospital, reporters swarmed the entrance. Cameras, microphones, flashes, all waiting for a statement. Meanwhile, online, the story exploded. Tweets, videos, hashtags, hashtag respect, hashtag AOC, hashtag saved by compassion. People from all over the world commented, sharing what the moment meant to them. If you were in AOC's place, helping someone who once insulted or doubted you, would you still step up? Type yes in the comments if you believe kindness should never depend on who's watching. And tell us what city or country you're watching from, because this message is going global. Later that afternoon, Alexandria stood before the press outside the hospital. Flashes went off, questions flew. "Congresswoman, how does it feel to save a billionaire's life?" AOC, "It's not about who he is, it's about who we are. When someone's in need, we act. That's humanity. Do you think this changes how your critics see you?" AOC, "Maybe, but I didn't do it for them to see me differently. I did it because it was right. the clip spread even faster. Comment sections flooded with words like integrity, respect, real leadership, but the most surprising response came from Richard Vail himself. Vail. The next morning, he released a statement, a full-page letter on his company's website, titled Gratitude. He wrote, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reminded me that leadership isn't measured by wealth or power, it's measured by humanity. Last night, she saved my life. Today, I want to use that life to make a difference. The statement shook the internet, stockholders, journalists, even his rivals, everyone was stunned. Then, in a televised interview, Richard Vail went further. For years, I disagreed with her politics, but when I needed help, she didn't hesitate. If that's not true character, I don't know what is. Even critics began to soften. The story had transcended politics. It had become a symbol, a message that no matter how divided the world gets, empathy still wins. Later that evening, as Aok walked home, her phone buzzed nonstop with messages and mentions. But she ignored most of them. She looked out at the New York skyline, the same city that could lift you up or tear you down in a heartbeat. And for a rare moment, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. Aok, maybe people will remember the point wasn't saving a billionaire. It was saving our humanity. Across the world, from Manila to Madrid, from Lagos to Los Angeles, people shared the clip not for fame, not for politics, but for hope. Hope that one act of courage could still remind us who we are at our best. The tables had turned, but in the end, the real victory wasn't over power or pride, it was over division. If this story inspired you, type humanity first in the comments. Because no matter where we ray from or who we are, compassion is what truly connects us. The world had watched a billionaire fall and rise again through the hands of someone he once dismissed. But the real story wasn't about survival, it was about redemption. Part 7. By morning, the story was everywhere. Every major outlet ran the headline in bold letters. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saves billionaire's life in Midtown hotel. Clips from that night flooded every social platform. You could hear the crowds gasp, see her hands pressing rhythmically on his chest, and hear her calm voice cutting through chaos. Millions watched, millions commented, and millions felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. In New York, reporters stood outside the hospital where Richard Vail was recovering. His condition, stable, his statement, still pending. But Aok, she wasn't giving interviews. She wasn't capitalizing on the moment. When a journalist asked how she felt being called a hero, she just said, Aok, I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone in danger. That line replayed on every network, a quiet truth louder than 1,000 speeches. Across the world, people began sharing their own stories, moments they had stepped up, helped a stranger, or stood against prejudice. The hashtag Human First trended for 3 straight days. In Manila, a nurse posted, watching her reminded me why I chose to serve. In London, a street artist painted her portrait with the words, compassion has no party. In Kenya, students shared clips in classrooms, talking about courage and humility. And in the U.S., thousands of young people said they felt inspired again, that maybe leadership wasn't about titles, but actions. Then came the moment no one expected. 3 days later, Richard Vail himself appeared outside the hospital, pale, weak, but standing. Microphones surrounded him, flashes blinding his tired eyes. A journalist shouted, Mr. Vail, what would you like to say to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? He paused, breathing carefully, and then said something that would silence the world for a full 10 seconds. Richard Vail, I owe her my life, and I owe her an apology. Gasps. Cameras clicked. He continued, she's spent years fighting for people I ignored. That night, she didn't see me as a billionaire or an enemy. She saw me as a man who needed help. And that changed everything. That clip broke the internet. Even his own board members applauded. And for once, the headlines weren't about scandal, division, or money. They were about grace. Days later, Alexandria received a handwritten note delivered to her office. Inside was a simple message. Thank you for saving my life and for reminding me what it means to live it with purpose. Richard, she folded the note quietly, smiled, and placed it in her desk drawer, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. In a world obsessed with status, that night proved something powerful, that humanity doesn't check your bank balance, that courage doesn't ask your title. And that kindness, true kindness, is the one thing that still cuts through all the noise. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance, wealth, or background, type respect in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from. Let's fill this world with stories that remind us humanity always comes first. And that was the night Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saved a billionaire. Not just his life, but maybe his heart too.